Hi, everybody. It's another Conversations with, and I'm Dick Vaughn. Well, today I have with me Gene Strauss. And Gene is a candidate for a state representative in the 5th Worcester District.
That's correct.
Now, Gene, I have to ask you this question. When you're a little girl growing up, and your mom and dad sat at the table and said, Jeannie, what do you want to be when you grow up? I can't believe you would have said, I want to be a state rep.
That's probably true, but I did have this dream of wanting to be a Renaissance man.
Oh, good.
Of wanting to do a lot of things over the course of my life. I wanted to be an Olympian, I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be a filmmaker, I wanted
Great.
to
How close did we come?
We did everything. Now
Good.
I'm moving into something that I got
Well, let's
inspired
talk about that. So you wrote,
Yep,
you write books, Olympia,
yep. Well, didn't make it, but
okay,
tried hard.
but tried hard. And what else?
Well, married a great guy, had 2 kids. Being a wife and mother was sort of not on my early list. Played musical instruments.
Great.
Gotten to do lots of different things. Played professional tennis.
Really?
Just one tournament.
Okay.
I'm thrilled. I've lived a great life, and now it's time to serve. And my inspiration to do this came from actually my work as a documentarian and then running legislative action myself. So I've been in a dozen states working on legislative issues, a single issue, and watching legislators at the state level, I thought, people can really do things here that help people. And I'm totally inspired by what I've seen elsewhere.
But I'm going to say something to you.
Yes, sir.
I have a philosophy, and
Yeah?
I've told this to people. I have learned in my life that nobody has ever said that a government knows how to run a government. In fact, they've proven beyond a reasonable doubt that they don't know how to do that. Now, the biggest problem we have today is they are no longer the governments. What they are, the biggest single business in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, business happens to be the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Has more employees, has bigger pensions, bigger insurance costs, takes in more money,
Yep.
spends more money than any other business. The biggest business in the town of Spencer is the town of Spencer, okay? And what's happening is they're still trying to run them like a government. And you talk about legislators that can help the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the greatest single tragedies of most of our legislatures is that's not what they end up doing.
I do think, though, that there's legislators that I've met that are in this state that have done a lot of good for people. From Steve Brewer, I think Senator
Oh.
Steve Brewer is a phenomenal
Great
human
personal
being.
friend of mine. I knew the senator when he was Senator Wetmore's aide.
Okay, so
I
you
knew,
go way back 40 years with him.
Way back, oh
Yep,
yeah.
yep.
And of course, he used to bring Bob Wetmore, Senator Wetmore, up to WARE in Ware for our Sound Off program. This is back in the 70s and 80s and so forth. So there are people like a Senator Brewer who are very people-oriented. And I'm always reminded of another great senator, Dick Moore, who was a great pal of Senator Brewer's. And every time they were together, Moore would say, he is the only person that I've ever met that would attend the opening of an envelope. Steve Brewer never missed an opening.
He never missed an opening, and I think, wherever there's 2 people, there he will be.
He was there.
But I think he also cares about people, and I
he
think
does.
it
He
comes through deeply.
genuinely cared and worked very diligently on a lot of vital, important pieces of legislation, both in the House and Senate and over the years. And so there are standouts. But one of the other problems, and I think, and I've noticed it in Massachusetts, we have too many lawyers who become reps.
Yep.
And they protect. For instance, we have a situation. I'll give you a classic example. I lived in Sturbridge until 5 years ago. We bought a nice little place on the lake in Charlton, and we moved to Charlton. When I moved to Charlton, the same 2 automobiles that I had, each went up $200. And I called my agent, and what's this all about? Oh, you're in Charlton now.
Huh.
What's that got to do with anything? Well, I found out that Charlton's in Zone 2, and Sturbridge was in Zone 1. Now, Sturbridge, and Charlton are very similar communities. So I got a hold of the Insurance Commission, and I got the runaround, okay? Got the runaround. And I said, look, it's based on the number of accidents and da-da-da-da-da-da. I said, yeah, but wait a minute. Sturbridge, it's got to be done by per capita. Well, what do you mean? Well, Sturbridge has 8 or 9,000 people. Charlton has 15,000 or 14.9. When you have more people driving automobiles, they're going to have more accidents. So you ought to find out, what's the ratio, because maybe, just maybe, Charlton isn't as high as you think they are. Well, they gave me the runaround. I've talked to 2 or 3 different reps, and they all say, oh, yeah. Well,
to me, it should be based upon your own driving experience.
Well, and here's the other problem. Second problem you got
Yep.
with insurance is, for instance, most of those regulations were written many years ago when cars had big chrome bumpers.
Yep.
There was no such thing as an SUV, et cetera, et cetera. So here's the deal. You get in an accident in Massachusetts, okay? And if it's your fault, now I had a situation that happened to me, and I got in an accident. I was at a tough intersection. I started to pull out, and at the last second, a guy came speeding down the hill. So I had to stop. But I was out into the intersection. So I put it in reverse and slowly started to back up. Well, the person behind me had come forward with me.
So you had no place to go.
And I bumped into her. Now, it was my fault. Even though I argued that she must have her car under control at all time, she shouldn't be following too close to the car in front of her. Those are registry rules. The insurance company said, no, but you backed up and you hit her. There was a little dent on her bumper. The first estimate they had was $642. When it finally came in, it was $1,041. Well, the minute it went over $1,000, for the next 6 years, the insurance company is sticking it to Dickie.
Yep.
Okay? Now, my point is, we need to go back and pull all those old rules up and say, okay, if the accident is, and I'm just going to make these numbers up, 1,000, because today, if you hit one of those front bumpers, they're now all one piece, and the whole thing is plastic, and they can't fix them. If you
Right.
crack them,
It's the whole
thing comes off, and it's $3,000 for a new piece. Okay? Therefore, we need to redo those rules. And for instance, there should be a situation, and I'm just using an example. If you get in an accident and it's your own fault, and it's $1,000 to $2,500, then you get prorated for 1 year.
Right.
If it's $2,500 to $4,000, then it's 2 years. And if you total your car, then it's 5 years. But to give it to somebody for 6 years for a small minor accident, which mine was, and because the final bill came in just over $1,000, I get hammered for 6 years.
I think that's why, sometimes insurance companies come to you and they go, look, you might as well pay this out of your own pocket so it doesn't ding you on your insurance. I think that insurance has grown to be something that you really try to only use it if it's cataclysmic.
Well, I got to the point where, first of all, if you and I both knew that we wouldn't have an accident this year, we wouldn't even buy insurance, number one. Now, the reason they sell it to you is so that if you happen, they're there for you. But, well, they aren't there for you. And then they stick it to you when they are. And so my point is, there's something, you want to really help the people of Massachusetts? When I call the Insurance Commission's office, they got amnesia. They didn't want to talk about it. Why don't you change those things? Well, it sounds to me like they're more in bed with the insurance people than they are with the citizens.
Sometimes I think that one thing I learned in running legislation and being involved in legislation is that things are sometimes more complicated. Lots of times it depends on who's got their oar in the water last in terms of who wins.
Yeah.
I also think that there's a ton of issues like this that are sort of these little niggling issues that really drive all of us a bit crazy.
I can't comprehend there would be a rep sitting in the House in Massachusetts or a senator in the Senate business that wouldn't look at that and say, the guy's right.
The guy's right.
Let's get this changed. This is ridiculous.
Well, I think one thing that intrigued me, I started running the end of January, and in February, 7,000 new pieces of legislation were brought into the general court.
Yeah.
And by April, there were 1,400 amendments that were being looked at. The volume of legislation that's coming through here, there might be somebody working on that. You just don't even know about it.
Yeah.
I think one thing for citizens that's very frustrating is if they have an issue that's really a big concern to them, how do you get your legislators to sort of sort through the chafe and get to the heart of an issue that's important? People are so cynical about government now that they don't even exercise their right as citizens. Now, yesterday I went into the State House for the Massachusetts Missing Children's Day. The Bish family was there, as were a couple of other families. And I think that they have done their due diligence as citizens to keep an issue that is so heart-wrenching, but they keep it in front of the legislature every single year. They never take their foot off the gas. If this insurance issue is something that you're like peeved about, and you go to a couple people and you get nothing, you don't even know how to get your foot in the door, it's like, where do you start? And I think for a lot of citizens, they don't even know how to do that.
They don't. You know, I'm going to tell you a secret. I had a great dad. My father served in both World Wars. Mm-hmm. He was a commander in the Navy in the Second World War. He was gone for 5 years. I didn't see him for 5 years.
Wow.
When my dad came home, and we were kids growing up, there was 4 of us. I'm the oldest. Every once in a while, he'd look at me and say, son, whatever happened to common sense? And you know the sad part of our society today? It doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there was common sense then.
You operated by common sense.
Yeah.
I mean, my father used to say, you cannot take out a flathead screw with a Phillips screwdriver. You got to have the right tool to do the job. And so, you know, and I've watched it. I've watched kids today. I'm involved at our church. We're in charge of the altar service. We have a bunch of young little kids teaching them how to serve the masses. And it's amazing. But I've seen people, adults, young adults, have no apps. They don't know what, they can't even comprehend common sense. And sometimes it's so logical, it's not even funny.
Well, you know, in 1992, something happened that changed the world that those young people live in. And in 1992, there were 26 sites on the internet. And by the next year, there were over 10,000. And then it just exploded exponentially.
Can I tell you, and you reached a good point. For as good as those people who like computers think they're good, I think they've ruined our society.
Well, I think that first off, those of us that are old enough
Yep.
to have been sort of in the driver's seat for
Yep.
this, we didn't understand it. It was unwieldy
Right.
very quickly, and we've done very little to try and help create an environment where those tools, because that's what they're supposed to be as tools, are productive for our young people instead
right.
of divisive. I walk into a room nowadays, if I'm with, I don't care if it's people that are 8
Right.
or 80, they're all looking at their phone. I've gone to film like weddings, and it's like everybody from grandma to the flower girl are looking at a phone. And it's like you're at this social event, this marvelous lifetime social event, and you're not even connecting with each other. I think that we have a lot of issues. We'll always have a lot of issues. You've lived through a lot of issues in your lifetime.
Well, you see, the thing is, you take computers, and my argument with them is this. I would have thought, if somebody came up with the genius of what a computer can do, that they would have at the same time. I mean, when Henry Ford developed the automobile, and he could make it go forward, he developed a brake so that he could stop it before it hit the tree, okay? So he sold them with a car, with a motor that would take it forward or back, but he had a pedal that would stop it, okay? Now, I would think that an industry as big as it is would have figured out a way to protect it so that hackers can't get in.
Well, you know, I think it's like follow the money, Dick.
Yeah.
Follow the money, because it was, I think a lot of the expansion was about money. And I think a lot of we have a lot of young guys that are ostensibly extremely wealthy that don't necessarily have a sense of common sense or ethics that you're talking about. And because of that, this just is still unwieldy. I mean, will Facebook really rein things in because they got called up in front of Congress, in front of a bunch of congressmen that don't even know what Facebook is? I think, you know, there are issues here that are so like at the surface of things that all citizens in our towns are coping with. It's like there's so much busyness to all of our days.
You know, someone asked me the other day, you know, what I really thought about, what it was like when I grew up. Now, I graduated from Malden High School in 1953, and it was a different world.
Sure.
Different world. We loved each other. We all got along. And in fact, in the 50s, if you were from Malden, you were an Irish Catholic, you were an Italian Catholic, or you were a Jew. That's who lived in Malden, okay? And we had our own sections of town. Now, I lived in Oak Grove. That was lovingly called Hop Heaven, because that's where all the Irish lived. And we had Edgeworth, and that was called affectionately Guinea Gulch, because that's where the Italians lived. You say that today, they'll lock you up and put handcuffs on you. Okay, you can't say that today, but we cared about each other.
We cared about
and
each other.
now
And
we had families, and we were together, and we enjoyed each other. And if you did something, by the time you got home, your dad already knew.
And you certainly
Okay.
didn't go home and tell Dad, my teacher gave me a C,
No.
and have Mom and Dad go in and
At
take the
Malden-
teacher to task.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
At Malden High School, if you got thrown out of a classroom, you went to the office, you were sent home,
Yeah.
and you couldn't, listen to this, you could not come back to school until you brought your mother and your father.
Wow.
Because in those days, Mummy stayed home and Daddy
Right,
worked.
right.
And your dad had to take time out of work to get you back into that school. And that was the last time you ever got kicked out of school. Okay? Our colors were blue and gold. Boys had to wear a shirt and tie. If you forgot your tie, the commercial girls department made this great big blue bow tie with gold polka dots on it.
So nobody ever
And you'd
wanted
have to
forget
go to
their
the
tie.
office, and if you didn't have your
That's great.
tie, you went to the office and you wore that for the day. You only did it one time. That's discipline. Right?
Yeah. Nah, when I was a kid, you would go and talk to your teachers after school. You'd go
Absolutely.
back and see your teacher from last year that you loved.
Yeah.
You know, you had
Yeah.
this freedom to kind of
Relationship.
move around.
Yeah.
And you knew other adults. If somebody in the neighborhood saw you messing around, your parents knew about it. You're
That's right.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Because people knew who everybody was. But
That's
the world
right.
has changed. And we now have a group of kids that are growing up that we still all love, still all want to see have good, decent lives. And so I think we kind of got off on this in terms of the cynicism we can have about government.
Yeah.
That nobody does anything. That we
That's right.
feel like, and
Well,
as
no, not that they don't do anything, but they all got their hands in the cookie jar.
Well, I don't.
They all end up enhancing themselves, and we see it. We find out that congressmen, for instance, even if they lose, they get paid forever. They have insurance forever. They get a raise every year. They even changed the rule. They used to have to vote on it. Now, if they don't vote, automatically at midnight on the 31st, it goes up. And people see this and just shake their heads. And you see the biggest problem we have in our government, and that's why I'm glad you're running, is the problem with our governments. The ins protect the ins because the ins don't want the outs in. That's why you have people who are in office for 27 years,
Well, I'll tell you,
28 years.
It's hard to
And-
run against an incumbent.
because and you know what? They're all brothers. They may get on the floor and yell at each other. Let me tell you a secret. Senator Kennedy's best friend was a guy named Senator Orrin Hatch. They were like this. And when they each needed something, if Hatch needed something and he needed 4 votes, he'd go to Kennedy, and Kennedy would deliver 4 votes for him. And if Kennedy needed something, he'd go to Hatch, and Hatch would get 3 Republicans to support it. And that's how but they got things done. And what's happened today is and in fact, the amazing thing is the Democratic Party of today isn't anywhere even near the Democratic Party of my father. The Republican Party of today isn't anywhere even near the Republican Party it was 30 years ago. What we have today is popularists, ultra-conservatives, conservatives, liberals, flaming liberals. Yeah, we don't have, and that's within the party structure. So even the parties have trouble controlling themselves.
Well,
I mean, look at poor Paul Ryan's going through.
I want to take this back to the level of, I don't think everybody's got their hand in the cookie jar. Let me just say that, because I've met a lot of really great people.
You're right.
I want to also take it back, though, to, so I'm running for state rep.
Yeah.
And there's 10 and a half towns. I'm going to tell you, Ware, a little sliver of Ware is also part of this district. So the towns I would represent run from East Brookfield all the way up to Hubbardston. And there are citizens in these towns at the selectman level, at just the volunteer level, that are the core of exactly what you're talking about. They do care about people. They're not sitting there looking at their phones all day long. They're out there looking for ways in which they can help their community. I believe in localism, which isn't local government, but it's really a network of people locally being bonded together by common issues, whether it's concern about senior citizens. We got a lot of senior citizens in our towns that are invisible. They've worked their whole life, and once their spouse dies, if they're single and they're over 65, an enormous number of citizens in Massachusetts that are over 65 have to choose between food, rent, heat, and medicine. And a lot of times they don't take their medicine every month.
No, they don't. They can't afford it.
They can't afford it. And so
I saw it happen at a CVS.
I'm watching people in towns. I just spent the morning with this marvelous guy from Brookfield, Clarence Snyder, and the things that he and other citizens are trying to do for the citizens, the senior citizens in his town. So I do think that at the local level and even at the state level, I see people getting things done. Washington, D.C., I'm not even going to touch it with a 10-foot pole because it's like it's unwieldy. We're getting all of our information from different sources, so it's polarizing people, and it's like at the end of the day, citizens in our towns are hurting, and we need to listen. We need to pay attention to what they're going through. I'll have people come up and talk to me about infrastructure issues. We have citizens that are dying from the opioid crisis, and we can talk about drugs and who's responsible there, but we need to reframe how we look at addiction, that's for sure.
Well, one of the things that I touched on earlier, and until the day she died, my mother had it on her refrigerator. I had a wonderful mother.
I bet you
And
did.
this is what that sign said. And it was, when I was a little kid, it was there. We are ultimately responsible for ourselves.
Yep.
And that's how we were brought up. We were taught independence, stand on your own 2 feet, and be responsible for your actions. And I had a great friend of mine who was a psychiatrist. I studied psychiatry. My father used to say I was dangerous.
My oldest son just graduated from medical school, is becoming a psychiatrist.
Right.
So
And Dr. Borenstein was 88 years old, great friend of mine. And I collaborated with him on some programs. And he used to have a sign on his desk, and this is what it said. You can do anything you want to do, anytime that you want to do it, as long as you are willing to pay the price for your actions, not knowing in advance, however, what the price might be. Okay? And that's how we used to try to teach people. Go ahead, you want to rob a bank? Go ahead. Now remember, if you get caught, you're going to jail. So if you're not willing to go to jail, don't rob the bank.
Yep.
But it goes back to one of the great things I think a lot of people are concerned about today, and go back to when I said the difference between when I grew up and today, and it's the word entitlement. We have a lot of people who just think they're entitled. And,
Right.
and
They
I
have a
think
right to
that's
things.
our own governments have done that over the years to them, and yet, look, you got to earn your own way, but as you travel around, what are you really hearing? What are they really talking about? Now you're out campaigning.
Well, the big thing, I think, is school funding, that the state honor its pledges going back into the 60s of reimbursing our rural schools for 100% of the transportation cost if they did even,
Yeah.
We need more funding here. And, the idea of charter schools is marvelous, but in our area, those charter schools are killing our district schools and even impacting our regional schools. And so charter schools, I think, can't be built on the back of public schools. If the whole idea is to provide equal opportunity for a great education, to top students that maybe
Right.
want to go. So you've got this great
Yep.
school that's going into Sturbridge, Old Sturbridge Village. That's wonderful. What's it doing to Southbridge? And are
Yeah.
we going to be providing the kind of education we want for every school kid here? Because
Well, in your own new district that you're going to be,
Spencer
and East Brookfield, they've been talking for years. Is regionalization the real answer for them?
right. Well, they've done this study.
Yeah.
My gut sense is that they're not going to split. But we will see. And then another issue becomes, and this is for greater minds than me, how are we going to do education for the next 50 years?
Oh.
Because it's changed.
It is.
It's changed. And so you have kids that go
We
to
live in
Prouty.
a different world, yeah.
You have kids that go to Prouty that are very bright. They want to study Chinese. They got to go to Quabbin.
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden we go from 450 students in Spencer down to whatever it is now. It's low 300s, might even be
Yeah.
below 300.
Yeah.
And every single student that you drop there, you still have the same heat. You still have the same janitor. You
Yeah.
still have the same staff.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think that the school funding issue, if we could get the state, and I've talked to people that have been involved with this, it's not an easy problem to fix, and it's going to take time, it's going to take patience, but it's certainly an issue where people have been working on this. I think one thing that's got to be infuriating for people that have been working an issue is to hear I'd like to call myself a young upstart at 63,
Yeah.
come in and sort of say, well, we're going to work on this. People have been working on
Yeah.
it.
Well,
And-
one of the things goes back to, and we talked about the cynicism of government. How many times have they voted now to lower sales tax. How many times have they voted to change, and the legislature pays absolutely no attention to it, and just keeps rolling along because, quote unquote, I mean, I'll give you an example. The fees at the registry of motor vehicles, it's gouging.
Well,
Gouging, $80 for a number plate. And those plates last 30 years. Because I was there when we switched the plates from the green to the new red, white, and blue ones.
Yep.
Those plates were bought out in 1982, those red, white, and blue plates. The original set of them are now, what, 35 years old? And they cost us $2 a plate. And we've been getting 60, 70 bucks a year for them. The minute you mention lowering the rates at the RMV, the reps and senators go crazy because that's a cash cow.
Right.
The registry generates millions of dollars. You want to help people out? Lower the price of a driver's license from 75 bucks to 70.
It's going to be interesting to see what happens with this millionaire's tax, and that's going to be a taxpayer issue.
Yeah.
What do they want? You know, obviously, it's easy for everybody to assume, well, we should just attach that tax onto everybody.
Right.
Does that mean that, you know, companies will flee? I don't know. You know, they did a millionaire's tax in California, I think, and they actually saw the number of people that, you know, were a part of that group increase. So I think that would bring much needed revenues into the state. Here's an issue that certainly any new state legislator is going to face, is you come in the door, and we talked about entitlements before, but entitlements are things that some people have paid into their whole life.
Yeah.
That was their, you know, basically their retirement
my
fund.
mother and father grew up with, we're going to have Social Security.
Right.
Really?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well,
Now,
I mean,
if the
we
United
have-
States government, for instance, would put all the money back that they took out of it when they needed money, Social Security wouldn't have a problem.
Right. But, you know,
Get 'em to do it.
Woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yeah.
You know, you go back on this stuff. But I think that the bottom line is, if you come in as a new legislator, 2/3 of the budget's already spent.
More than that.
And so
It's almost
more than that.
75%
Yeah.
is
And so
done.
It's like, what can you do that's new?
Not much.
And how do we address?
And then as a new legislature, you know, you got a Speaker of the House who controls everything.
Yep.
And
How do you get stuff on the floor?
Yeah, you're going to get what committee you're going to get on. What you know.
That's gonna be
and-
up to-
And what do you have to sell out to get it? You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Yep.
And so, you know, it's.
But you know, it goes back to Jimmy Stewart and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Yeah.
I think you have to go into it with a sense of optimism. You have to go into it
Oh,
with
yeah.
a sense of caring.
Yeah.
And you have to go into it and celebrate the victories that you do have. And I do think that every session there are victories.
Oh,
We're
yes.
just, you know, you're always going to find something new, Dick, that you're going to be
Yeah.
frustrated with.
Oh yeah.
But I think that
And the other thing too is you can't fix it all at once.
you can't
You
fix it
can't
all at
fix
once.
what's taken 80 years to bring down. You're not going to put back in an hour and a half. And so, and in your case, a new rep's got to pick and choose your battles.
You got to pick and choose your battles, and you got to, you know,
You
one
know.
thing that's good is I'm 63, so that means this is not, you know, career
Yeah.
building here.
Yeah.
This is someone who I very much want the job. I very much want to serve. I very much feel that experiences I've had have prepared me for this. No, I don't have a law degree, but I do have 4 college degrees, and I've done a lot of work in my life, and I'd like to put my energy this way.
One of the things I learned in my collaboration with Dr. Borenstein was women outperform men.
Well,
Very interesting story. You know, someday I'll tell you that whole story about how the difference between a little boy when they're born and a little girl. Little boys are taught to play. They got a Tonka truck, a train, a baseball glove, and a helmet. But the little girl is taught to help mom. And between the ages of 1 and 5, you're 80% of what you're going to be. And that's learning how to dress Bobby and change her, help mom set the table. All the skills that it takes to run a company.
well, I had 2 sons, and so they had to do that work.
Yeah,
So hopefully they're
good.
well prepared.
But they're well-rounded anyway. But no, the thing is that I'm delighted to see that you're running. I want you to come back again and chat with us
I'd
as
love
the
to.
camp moves along, and because I think in candor, and I say it openly, I think the time has come to get more and more women involved in our governments because they have a different perspective, and they look at it through a different set of eyes, and I think that time is long, long, long overdue. So.
Well, I'm thrilled you asked me to come. I
Well,
very much appreciate
well,
it. I've loved
and
meeting you.
I will, and I want you to come back and see us again as the campaign moves along, because you got what, 3 or 4 months?
We have like a June 1st to November 6th is,
Yeah.
I think, 5 months.
5 months,
5
yeah.
months to go. So
Not
a lot of
long.
hands to shake.
A lot of hands to shake.
A lot of doors to
and,
knock
and
on.
people to meet.
So-
So it was great, Gene. Thank you so much for coming.
you.
And I'm sure you're going to do well.
Okay.
Have fun.
Thanks very much.
There you are, folks, and other conversations with